Yeah, 8:31 this morning here on OTB AM, and I'm delighted to say Paddy Andrews, 7-time All-Ireland winner with the Dubs, it says here, but Tommy's put in, more importantly, co-host of the football pod with Paddy and Andy. Paddy, how are you?
Morning, Jer. How are you getting on? You all right?
In the list of priorities, obviously, we've got to get this right for future billing. How are you getting on?
Very good. Very interesting weekend. I got away for a couple of days with the missus, which was nice. I managed to squeeze in 3 or 4 of the games as well. So
you really know how to romance a lady. It's like
we're on the road a long time, Jer. She knows the crack. She knows what she's into at this stage.
Well, listen, there's a few big things that I want to talk about. Owen hates when I hype up Kerry, but Kerry are building a team that has the potential to beat Dublin. There's no point in you building a team that's going to be super defensive the way Tyrone tried to beat Dublin over the years. You've got to come at them with something completely different, and you've got to come at them with a team who can score a lot of goals to keep you in the game, because we know Dublin are going to chip over 18 to 22 points. And finally, it looks like Kerry are starting to build a side who are going to have the right pressure points, the right physicality, the right age profile, who can at least put it up to the Dubs.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on, and to be fair to Tyrone, despite what happened on Saturday night, I think Fergal, Logan and Brian Dewar have identified that as well, that if you're going to win the All-Ireland and take the next step, you cannot park the bus anymore. That style of play is redundant now in terms of it will get you to a certain point, but it's not going to beat Dublin, it's not going to win the All-Ireland, it's not going to beat Kerry. So, and that was such an interesting thing last year with Kerry, that Peter Keane, look, the decision, and it's been well spoken about, to play more of a defensive style against Cork in preparation to hopefully play Dublin later in the year, and it just did not suit Kerry. It doesn't suit the players they have. It obviously goes against their strong tradition as well. Kerry are the most dangerous when they play their forwards up front, when they play on the front foot, and they've been building over the last number of years, and Saturday night was a classic example of that. They're about 2-3 years ahead of where Tyrone are trying to get to. They've always had talented forwards, Kerry, whereas now there's, like exactly what you said, there's athleticism in their game. And we touched on it on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. Lots of different teams are trying to find 2 or 3 things when it comes to the National League, but Dublin and Kerry aren't overly concerned with winning the National League, particularly this year. And it's the nonsense of a shared title. Dessie Farrell and Peter Keane were looking for, can we find 2 or 3 players that are going to push us on to the next level in the championship? And I think Kerry have ticked a lot of those boxes. They've found the style of play that suits their players. They're back on the front foot, and they're playing to their strengths. And that's the most impressive thing they've taken from the last 5 weeks in the National League, most certainly. And they're the standout team to challenge Dublin. They're so far ahead of the pack, Dublin and Kerry, and that was just so evident at the weekend as well.
It does seem as well, Paddy, when you see these teams coming to try and contend with Dublin, they can have 1 or 2 great years, and then they have maybe a couple of important retirements and they lose a bit of momentum. With this Kerry team, it feels, as you say there, the age profile is growing nicely at this point, that the 2019 example is not irrelevant, and they'll have grown from that. Last year is not irrelevant. They'll have grown from that. These are all layers that will be built upon if Kerry do eventually dethrone Dublin this year.
100%. Like, no team is going to come out of the pack in their first year and have all the answers. It takes time. It takes a bit of a journey. Like, say, despite losing to Cork last year, Kerry would have learned a hell of a lot from that. They're not going to go back to that defensive style. It doesn't suit them. So that's, although it was a disaster at the time, they would have learned huge lessons from that. They were not that far away in 2019. Like that, the drawn final was so close. Another 2 minutes and Kerry could have won that game, and it's a totally different conversation. But like I said, what was Peter Keane looking for out of this National League campaign? Can they find a back that's going to be able to deal with a Con O'Callaghan or a Kieran Kilkenny or Dublin at their best? And you've seen Gavin White came forward there at the weekend, had an amazing game. Obviously his goal, we'll see at the highlights, but I thought Jason Foley was really good, really fast, tight, aggressive on Darren McCurry. They need a defender who can do that alongside Thomas Sullivan. They need legs around the middle of the pitch. David Moran, as good a player as he's been for Kerry, they needed someone who could be in the engine room around him, and I think they found that in Dermot O'Connor. He's been a real standout performer of the National League for them. And 2 of the most important players, I think, Clifford is obviously going to take the plaudits and Sean O'Shea, but Paddy Clifford and Darragh Moynihan they've been a real edge to that Kerry forward line. They're making all the hard runs. They're allowing the marquee forwards to shine, and that's what Kerry needed. They couldn't be over-reliant on David Clifford just putting their hands together and praying that David Clifford's going to score 110 every single game. He'll probably get close to it, but Kerry need 2 or 3 other forwards who can work the ball and occupy other defenders, and that's what those two guys have had really standout campaigns so far, and the balance seems to be right up front, and you could see it was like the perfect storm on Saturday night. All of those things click for Kerry, but that's this journey they're on, and despite the 4 games they've played, the biggest moment and the most pleasing thing for Peter Keane under the whole National League campaign would be the third quarter against Dublin and Thurles. That's what Kerry are going to learn most from out of the National League. They're not going to be worried about hammering Galway or the non-event against Roscommon, or even the non-event that the Tyrone game turned into the weekend. The real learning point for Kerry was we got a run on Dublin in the third quarter in that game and got us back into the game. There were 7 points down, and all of a sudden Kerry outscored Dublin 8 points to a goal, and they landed on something there. They landed on a style of play, and that's what Peter Keane will take most out of the National League, I feel.
Can we move on to the Dubs? Because the game against Donegal, we've been dying to see Donegal against Dublin in a big game for years. We were waiting for this, and then ultimately it was a bit of a letdown because Dublin just kept them at arm's length. And I don't know if there's a little bit of Donegal trying to keep a bit of powder dry, and obviously Murphy's injured at the moment. You know, he was in his civilian clothes. Really dying to see what it would be like with him there. And I don't know, can we do we take anything from that game about where Donegal are at the moment or about where Dublin are at the moment?
No, and I'm sure answer no. And that was the disappointing thing for the weekend. I mean, if you could have handpicked 2 semi-finals, you got Kerry against Tyrone, Dublin against Donegal, arguably the top 4 teams in the country playing against each other. But by the time the Dublin-Donegal game threw in, Murphy wasn't playing. They weren't going to risk him with championship in 2 weeks' time. There was not going to be a league final after the result in Killarney, and it just seemed to be a bit of a challenge match feel to it. And we didn't get that test. You're right, Jared. Dublin-Donegal has been a game that everyone's been waiting to see. We were waiting to play Donegal last year in the All-Ireland semi-final, and they tripped up against Cavan, obviously in the Ulster final. So it's very hard to read into how that game panned out. I don't think it's a true reflection of Donegal. And then Dublin just did what Dublin will do, control the game for the majority of it. And then in the blink of an eye, like the start of the second half, Dublin realised, okay, there's an opportunity here. Donegal are a bit flat, and they reel off 3 points in the space of 3 minutes, and all of a sudden they're 7 points up in the blink of an eye, and the game is gone from Donegal, and it just petered out for the last 30 minutes. And that's what Dublin do. You wouldn't have learned anything on their side. It was more, can we see what Donegal and get a bit of insight in how they're going to challenge Dublin? But we just didn't materialise at all. It was a bit of a disappointment, that game. But I don't think it's a true reflection of where Donegal are at. I'd still have them as the favourites for the Ulster Championship, despite that performance at the weekend. It
did feel as if that was a very controlled performance from Dublin in some ways, and we're very used to seeing that. So is that like them actually very... Are they purring along nicely, or are they just not being challenged? I can never tell, because we've actually seen them win championships where they've done that to everybody they've played the whole way through, and at the end they get the big cup and everybody gets a medal. And that, you know, that's one of those.
You're right. It's a very similar pattern to what Dublin have done over the last 4 or 5 years, and that is, for me, I think that's what sets them apart. It's their controlling of the game, their game intelligence, and their decision making. That is what sets Dublin apart. That a team can be kind of tickling along and about 3 or 4 points each, but Dublin have leaders in every single line of the pitch, whether it's Cluxton, Fitzsimons in the full back line, McCarthy and Fenton in the middle, Conn and Scully in the half forward line, or Dean Rock or Kieran Kilkenny in the full forward line. Every one of those players knows exactly what's happening in the game at every moment of the game. So it might be 20 minutes in and the opposing team thinks we're doing all right here, but Dublin will sense that. They'll know. And when there's the second there's a switch off from the opposing team, like how many times have we seen it over the last few years? In the space of 2 or 3 minutes, Dublin rattle off 1-4 or 1-5 or 2-2 or 4 or 5 points for play. And in the blink of an eye, Dublin are gone. The game is over. They're 6 or 7 points up. And then they just go back to what people might say, the kind of boring or monotonous style of play. But they've done the job. They're ruthless, so ruthless for those 3 or 4 minutes. Everyone on the pitch senses the opportunity that, okay, they've switched off. If Dublin win a kick out, an opposing kick out, they'll know, let's go for the jugular here. Or if Dublin turn over an opposing defender coming out, they'll know the defence isn't set, go for goal. Everyone, and you can see it with Paddy Small's goal at the weekend. Donegal, it's 6-all, 7-6. They think they're in the game. Dublin turned them over. There's an opportunity, and it's straight in, goal. And all of a sudden, the game's over. And that's what they're so good at. It's that intelligence, they'll sense the opportunity, and when they do, they are absolutely ruthless. And that's what sets Dublin apart more so than, yes, they've got really talented players, they're really fit, they're really strong. It's their experience and their game intelligence. They just do not make the wrong decision. It's so, so rare you see Dublin giving away anything easy. And that's the big thing, I think, that sets them apart from the Mayos or Tyrone or Donegal into this world.
Yeah, it sometimes feels in a game like this that the 4-point margin of victory is like a predetermined outcome, and everything else in between is just, I guess, window dressing. Like, one of the things, like you say there, it felt last week as if this might be the top 4 teams in the country going toe-to-toe over the course of the weekend. Mayo, though, you could throw into that top 4 mix. We just don't know, and in some ways they've been insulated, Paddy, from any real criticism because they've been in Division 2. So what's your read, as best as you can read it, on where Mayo are at?
I think Mayo will win the Connacht Championship, and that's despite being in Division 2. And that's the interesting thing. We've had kind of 5 weeks of football here. And you kind of think, what have we really learned? Well, if you sat down and started National League, it would say Dublin would win the Leinster Championship, Kerry would win Munster, Mayo would win Connacht, and Donegal would win Ulster. And it'd be Donegal against Kerry and Dublin, Mayo in the All-Ireland semi-finals. Nothing's changed from what I've seen. Even with Mayo in Division 2, Galway haven't kicked on, and obviously the relegation yesterday. Roscommon was classic Roscommon. They're relegated to Division 2 again for probably the 5th time in 10 years. Mayo are still the top team in Connacht. And you could get a glimpse of that yesterday as well. The first half, like Clare, the fairy tale would be Clare getting up to Division 1, but the gap was shown there that Mayo are a Division 1 team. They had a bit of a blip last year. They got relegated, but they still made the All-Ireland final. And for 30 minutes yesterday, Mayo showed what they're all about. They're still the top team in Connacht. I'd be amazed if they didn't win the Connacht Championship. And the important thing for Mayo yesterday was some of their more experienced players seem to be back to their best. Aidan O'Shea is so important for them. Lee Keegan was back from cornerback sprinting up the pitch. Classic Lee Keegan. Oisin Mullen seems to be a real find for them as well. And it's back to Mayo playing their best style. Everyone attacking from the back. It's so athletic, so hard to play against. And for me, despite the fact they're in Division 2, and you're right, it's not an accurate gauge. They're playing teams that you'd expect them to be. But when you compare it to what you've seen from Roscommon and Galway in Division 1, I'd be amazed if Mayo didn't win the Connacht Championship.
Who's the second best team in Leinster, Paddy?
I would have said Meath, but that was it couldn't have went much worse for them yesterday. And you've been kind of waiting for Jack O'Connor to come in and get a rise out of Kildare. Andy McEnany's been there for 4 or 5 years with me. They've been building. They were in Division 1 last year, and okay, they didn't win any of the games, and you can only say, well, that's a bad year, but all the games were close. They would have learned a lot from that, and I fully expected them to come back up to Division 1, and they started off the league campaign, and you would have thought that as well. But the way it's finished for them, I know that the Mayo game was a bit, both teams had qualified, so you couldn't read too much into it, but that was a big game for me yesterday. They lose the game. They lose Brian Menton, they lose Donald Keoghan to injuries. There's no time to be injured this season with the way the championship's coming around. Conor McGill gets sent off. He's going to be suspended for the first game. They lose the Row as well, which is just, it was one of those really tight games. And Kildare will take huge. To win a game like that, Kildare will get a huge boost out of that. They're into Division 1, but they've won a real battle. And it was just a bad day for Meath all round. And the bottom line, they're not in Division 1. And if you're going to be competing to try and progress, you need to be in the top division. And it's such a setback for me to not make it back up, but also to lose those players. It probably puts Kildare, I'd have them as the second best team now. And Jack O'Connor's kind of building momentum going into the championship now.
I think Meath are one of the teams who got completely destroyed by there not being a backdoor last year and not being an opportunity for them to get back into what would have been Super 8s if the Super 8s still existed. You know, just that extra month of football and that extra month of training, we would have seen them benefit from that this year, and the straight knockout did them no favours last year. And likewise, you know, Kildare had no chance to lick their wounds and become a team who understood what Jack O'Connor was trying to do. So you're right, like, a lot of pressure on Jack O'Connor to kind of finally deliver, and maybe we can get into that a bit more. They've had some injuries as well, that I think Hyland went off, Feely went off, and without those two players, you know, ultimately it's going to be another cakewalk for the Dubs through Leinster as well. That was my last question about this. Like, the other teams, most of the other teams have some fairly big games which will keep them very battle-hardened by the time the All-Ireland semi-finals roll around. Is that in any way a concern this year, given the condensed nature of things, that a lot of teams will have a lot of confidence and momentum, Big Mo, by the time the semi-finals happen, whereas the Dubs will just not really have had that opportunity to test themselves against good quality opposition?
I don't think that will matter to Dublin. I think that's, if we're being honest, I think that's been the case for the last 7 or 8 years with the Leinster Championship. Dublin prepare for every game, whether it's Wicklow in the first round of the Championship, whether it's Kerry in the All-Ireland semi-final or final. They'll be ready to go when they need to be ready to go. I don't think it's much of a concern, and I know that's been levelled at them in the past, but the level Dublin are at and the experience they have of doing this, even with Desi coming in as a new coach and things like that, the show has just been kept on the road. So Dublin, like I say, it looks likely. You could say Dublin will play Mayo in a semi-final and Donegal will play Kerry. Dublin will be ready to play Mayo if that's the case. I don't see that ever being an issue for them, really. It's just they're so experienced, they're so intelligent, they're so smart at this stage. They've that many miles on the clock that they'll be ready to go when they need to be ready to go, whether they've had what perceived cakewalks in Leinster or tougher games. I don't think it'd be too much of a difference to Dublin.
All right, Paddy, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
No worries, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Paddy Andrews. You get more of the good stuff from Paddy and Andy on the Football Pod with Paddy and Andy and Tommy Rooney, which drops every Wednesday afternoon. It's been sensational stuff so far. If you've got any interest in Gaelic football, if you've got any interest in proper analysis of sport, then the minds of the two lads as corner forwards who had to work for everything that they got. So we've got a Footballer of the Year and a 7-time All-Ireland winner giving us proper insight into how the Dubs prepare for the first time and how Mayo prepared for the Dubs in the greatest rivalry of the last decade in Irish sport. Then you should get onto that. You can subscribe to the individual stream, the Football Pod with Paddy and Andy. You'll get that on the OTB SPORTS app or wherever you get your podcasts. And an hour rating on iTunes would definitely help that as well. And then, of course, you can also get it by just subscribing to the OTB GAA stream. So that is all available free, gratis, and for nothing. So it costs you no money to listen to that good stuff. A reminder, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Give me the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Oh, and how confident are you allowing yourself, how excited are you allowing yourself to feel about how great this Kerry team is and then might be beyond that?
I think you just have to kind of suspend any sort of caution at this point, because that's what the team have done. They've kind of like looked at the data points in their team. They've looked at the strengths and weaknesses in their team, and they're like, they're a bit like the Netherlands last night, but just with a better chance of winning the main silverware. They said, screw it, let's just take the handbrake off and let's just see what happens. And some crazy things have happened. A lot of goals scored over the course of the league campaign. That mad third quarter against Dublin. I mean, the journey so far has been pretty fun this season. Let's just put it like that. And I mean, it just gets very boring very quickly if you start talking about whether or not a team will win in All-Ireland, because there is still very much one team, I think, who is very much the favourite. And it's like Dublin had every team on a piece of string of varying lengths. Now, in fairness, the piece of string with Kerry is maybe a couple of inches at this moment.
I don't know if you remember how ridiculous it was that we talked ourselves into the fact that Meath might give the Dubs a game on the basis of the goals they scored and how they were building a team specifically designed to score goals. The Dubs give you chances. All that material, I'm going to roll it out again for Dublin Kerry this year.
But this really time fills me with confidence.
This time I actually have, we have a really strong, nasty streak in that Kerry team. They're athletic. They've got everything that you need. They're like, come on, you must be very excited about this. Yeah,
like without question. And
good.
I think you make a good point there as well about how road tested they will be as well. I think Clare and I hopefully, just being honest here, hopefully Cork actually are in Kerry's path, because to exercise that ghost last year will be important. But I think Cork and Mayo both have a chaotic energy about them that Kerry are also bringing to the table at the moment. And I think from a purely spectacle point of view, I think it'll be a really good game. And Kerry and Mayo may be unlikely to meet in the championship this year, because Dublin are probably going to take Mayo out. But I think that will be another brilliant clash, hopefully at some point in the next couple of years at championship level.